Okay, so we're ready to start creating our environment. So hopefully you've got your landscape ready and you've got somewhere that you can put your visitor center. So I'm just going to put mine roughly here, sort of a flattish area for the visitor center to sort of slot in around about here. You might want to just play around with the position of it a little bit. There we go, that actually works quite nicely. Move it over slightly. Move it up. Cool. So there's a good position for my visitor center. You can see that the green is just poking out of the corner there, but that'll be all right once we cover it in grass. So you can see that the visitor center is positioned in our world. It's also the right scale, so everything like the foliage and the plants that we might put in alongside it are all going to fit. So one thing that we need to do now is thinking about that foliage, the props and objects that we're going to be putting in. You've already seen one way to add in a prop such as something from your own collection from Maya, Blender, whatever you're using, where you can just drag and drop it in and click import all. You've also seen how to add in your asset packs from the marketplace that you might have downloaded. But we also have one more thing that we can use, which is the Quixel library. So Quixel was bought by Unreal, and if you have installed the plugin, you should see Quixel Bridge under your content drop-down menu. So if you click on that, it loads up this useful little web page. So once you're in Quixel, I'm just going to make this slightly bigger. There we go. You should be able to see that there are 13,827 assets that are free for you to use. So as long as you've signed in with your Epic Games account, so I have signed in with my Epic Games account there, you get Epic Games Unlimited or Quixel Bridge Unlimited, which allows you to download any of their assets as many times as you like in any quality. As well for all your projects, and they're free to use, so you can use them for projects that goes on to make millions of pounds if you are so lucky to do so, and you don't have to pay Unreal a dime other than their royalty fee rather after you've made your first million, but I think you'll be all right after that. So Quixel Bridge has a whole load of different types of assets that you can actually download. So they have 3D assets, which are things like buildings, rock cliff faces, rocks, pebbles, tracks in the snow, car tracks, that sort of thing. You've also got tables, windows, doors, chairs, there's food, apples, bananas, that sort of thing. They've got all of those. They've also got 3D plants. Now, they're currently working on their tree assets. They don't currently have trees, so most of the plant assets at the moment are ground foliage, which is okay for us because I've actually installed some tree packs for this. Then they've got the surfaces, also known as the textures. So these are photo scanned, textured. All of these things, I should note, are photo scanned, so they're real objects that have been taken thousands and thousands of photos of, and then they run it through a photogrammetry software to make a 3D asset for us to use. But the surfaces have also been scanned, so they're really, really high quality textures of real surfaces, basically. So there's loads of those to use. You've got your decals, so if you want to add like some dirt or some graffiti, that sort of thing, they've got loads of that, and similarly with the imperfections as well. So it's really, really awesome that this is included inside Unreal for free. Because it allows us to do loads of things with the Quixel Bridge. So let's find some 3D plants that we can use so that we can download those in our environment. So we're looking for something which is slightly tropical. So I'm actually going to go for something that looks a little bit like a fern because it's supposed to be Jurassic Park. Here we go, so here are all the ferns, and I'm going to look for a good fern pack like this first one. So if the bigger the objects are, generally the, particularly in the foliage packs, the less sort of variations of the plant you have. So we're wanting something like this where it's got lots of different types of fern. So we're going to want that pack here. So I'm going to use the high quality, but there is also low, medium, high, and highest. This is all just to do with the amount of space storage, because you have to download the models. So if you're quite tight for storage, just go with low quality. Equally, if you aren't running off a graphics card, then you probably want to go off low, medium, just because of the graphic intensity of this as well. I'm going to stick with high just because I'm recording as well as sort of using the engine. And you should see two buttons, download and add. If this says subscribe or sign in, then don't worry. If it says subscribe, you need to go to the Quixel Bridge website and just log in to your Unreal Engine account. And it will say, do you want Unreal Unlimited or Quixel Unlimited? Click yes. It's completely free with an Epic Games account and allows you access to all of these amazing assets. If it says sign in, then just sign in to your Epic Games account. And again, if once you've signed in it says subscribe, then go to the website and you'll be fine. But for us, because it says download in green, we need to click download so it begins the download. And then once the add symbol turns blue, we can add it into our project. There we go, so we're all done. It says downloaded, a nice tick, and we can click add. And once this window pops up, sometimes your Unreal might freeze when you click add, particularly if you've got lots of assets that you're adding in. Don't worry, absolutely normal. So you can just click add and then it will load up a content drawer window to show you where it has saved those assets. So you can actually close all of that down and then you can hop into foliage mode. So come to selection mode, go to foliage mode or press Shift 3 and you can see it has already preloaded our ferns with their foliage type, but I actually downloaded some extra ones that we're going to want to use. So if I just navigate to the Megascans folder, you can see we've got 3D plants, and this is the ferns that we downloaded, and this is some other sort of clover-esque weed things. And you can see it's got a foliage folder here where we can add in just some extra bits of foliage, because nature, huge amount of variety in there, so you want to try and include that as much as possible in your environments. But obviously the more you add, the more computer power you're going to need to run it. So you just drag and drop those into the foliage drag and drop area, or you can click add and then search for the individual asset. That's a bit slow, so just drag and drop it. Again, might freeze, might not, you might be okay. Then in the foliage window, there's several things that are important to note. You've got your brush size and the brush density. So size obviously is to do with the area that you're covering in foliage, and the density is to do with the density of the plants that you are sort of planting. So it's important to note that the smaller your foliage is, the less the density matters. So smaller foliage will work quite nicely on high densities such as 0.5. But if you're going to put in a big tree, it won't work, because what it will try and do is it will try and put like 1,000 trees in the brush area that you've put. And that's just not realistic. It also is not going to be great for your computer. So if you're working with big assets, then make sure that you are turning down the density. And I'll show you an example of that later. Now, erase density works in a similar way, but to the paint density, but it basically means that when you erase everything, you don't have to erase everything. You can erase just a few. If you think there's one area that's too dense of plants that you've planted, then you can go back and erase those, okay? So next thing you might notice is that landscape and static mesh is ticked under filters. And what that means is when you paint, it will place objects on both static meshes and landscapes. Now, we don't want that because it will cover our visitor center in grass. So we're just going to do a landscape, and that way we can paint without worrying about putting grass on our visitor center. Now, this is only planting the things which are checked, which are currently these sort of clover weed thingies. But we want to include our ferns as well. You can see these aren't checked. The checkbox is empty. Now, you could go through and check these one by one. That's really slow. So what I'm just going to do is select everything we want, and then check and uncheck it so that we have those assets loaded up. And then when we click, there we go. We now have a mix of our clovers and our ferns as well. Okay, now it's going to look slightly funky just because we haven't put a material on our landscape. We'll do that in a minute. Now it's important to note that the foliage tool will actually paint underneath static meshes if there is a landscape. So if I was to paint here, although we wouldn't see it, it will be there, and that will affect your loading speed. So you really want to be careful when planting assets. You are only planting what you're going to see. For example, we're not going to see the if we have the camera here, we're not going to see anything behind the visitor center. So just don't put it there. We're just going to erase all of this because we don't need it. Okay. Now what you could do is just paint an area, then go through and erase everything that we're not going to see, just to keep it nice, neat and tidy. Okay, so for now I'm just going to change my brush size using the square brackets again, so that we have a pathway. I know this isn't what it's like in the film, but don't worry about it too much. There we go, and I'm going to say that will probably do us for now. We might need to come back and add something later. Now you can see how many of one asset it has sort of loaded up. It says the nice little numbers there. So we've got sort of nearly 2,000 of each, which is quite a lot of foliage. But we're still running at sort of 70 frames per second there, up in the top right corner, which is pretty good. So what we're going to want to do now is add in our trees. Now it is important to note that all of these ferns and everything are the size that they naturally would be as the downloaded assets. There's no variation. They're all the same size, which for these smaller plants is probably okay because we don't want them too big, too small, getting in the way, that sort of thing. But you are welcome to play around with that. But the important thing, and the way I'm going to show you how to do that, is with the trees, because the trees are big. So I'm just going to unselect everything there. Now I've got a great tree pack here from Project Nature. Two packs called Tropical Vegetation, and they are both free on the Epic Games launcher, so you're welcome to go and download those. They're the Tropical Vegetation packs by Project Nature, and the two that I've downloaded, I think there is a third one, but I've only downloaded two of the packs. There are something like 16 trees and a few other sort of small vegetation pieces as well. That I'm just going to quickly add. So remember to add something to your foliage, select it in the content drawer, drag and drop, and then it adds it in. There you go. You can see I've got them added up the top. And then I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. And I think this is a good example to use the filters with. So I'm looking for static meshes here. So I have a filter here for a static mesh. If I just remove that filter. If you click on this menu here, it gives you a list of filters that you can search by. So you can also search by name if you know what you're looking for. But I'm actually looking for a static mesh. So I go to the static mesh filter, and then it allows me to toggle that on and off, and it shows me all the static meshes that are involved. So I've got these static mesh here. I'm just going to drag and drop those 13 into there. And then we have our trees loaded up. Now, I'm just going to show you what I meant about using large assets on a high density. If I click here, you're going to see that I'm producing a lot of trees there in one area, and that's just not a useful amount of trees. It's too dense for anything to exist there. So that's not useful. So we're just going to get rid of that, and we're going to turn our density down. But before I do that, what I'm actually going to want to do is also change the scale. Remember, with smaller objects, the density doesn't matter as much, but trees are big, and we want variation. No trees are the same size. So what we can do under the scale settings here, under painting, there's scale. We can change this so that these two are different numbers. At the moment, min and max are the same, which means that the trees will all be the same size as the original static mesh. But if we change max to be like 3.5 and minimum to be 2, so everything gets larger, the trees will now start varying in size. But we're also going to want to turn down our density right down. So you can now see that I have these big trees, I have small trees, and then they're all clumped together as well. So maybe the density is still too large. So there we go. We can start painting with slightly more realistic sizing as well. So I'm just going to keep turning this down until I get something which I'm happy with. There we go, that will work. So what we can then do is increase our brush size, get nice and high up so we can see what we're doing. And then simply, we're just going to brush around our environment until we have something we have. I'm going to turn the density back up as well. So there we go. We have our foliage painted in, and maybe even slightly more, just so that we have something which looks a little bit like the original, so nice and dense, but with a few trees involved as well. Okay, next thing for us to do is to start introducing some textures into our landscape.